And do you have any examples or
Mhm.
stories where we can talk about, and you don't have to name the individual, but
Sure.
an individual where there was some effort on the company to help them on a personal level, personal fulfillment, and how that affected their allegiance, their engagement? Do you have anything like that you could share with us?
Yeah, I have a couple. I have a few examples. One that's top of mind is someone who actually was on my team who had been a really strong performer for me over several years. And I wouldn't say she wasn't performing, she just didn't seem herself. And despite me checking in with her as I normally would in one on ones and a variety of things, it ultimately started to take a toll on her ability to perform her job. So when it got to the point of needing to say, hey, this feels like it took a turn. And I know that as your employer, I've inquired what's happening and how can I help you? But she's a very self sufficient, self led individual and didn't really want my help, to be honest. She felt like she could handle it herself. But when it got to that point and I got her to open up, she shared with me that she actually had a couple of pretty tragic things happen within her immediate family, with her brother being in a car accident and suffering from a significant TBI that the entire family was trying to rally around and support. Almost at the same time, her father was diagnosed with cancer and needed to immediately start treatment. Her family's on the East Coast. She's here on the West Coast. So she wasn't functionally present really to be able to help her mom, who was dealing with a lot of the stress of handling both of these situations. And ultimately felt really disempowered to fix it, help it, anything. And that emotional turmoil really started to affect her sleep. It started to affect her mindset. And just became a very significant distraction. Understandably so. I'm not judging that at all. I think the first thing is, as an employer, again, we need to create a safe space where people know that they can open up to us and that there's some established trust in the environment to be able to speak our needs. That is an expectation. That's not a differentiator. That's just what we need to do. But when she was able to open up to me, we talked through what she had already tried and considered. And there were definitely some fixed mindsets in there about her opportunities, her willingness to ask for help, some perfectionist elements in there. She didn't want to be seen as not able to handle everything herself. And that can show up in a lot of different ways. In her case, we talked about it. We were able to shift some workload items. We were able to allow her to work remote for a couple of months to support her family, and a handful of other tactics that we took with her to make the process more manageable, including a little bit of additional time off. And she never would have asked for any of that. And she quite possibly could have devolved into a performance challenge over the next several months had she not been willing to open up to me and or been willing to consider some of the other skills or opportunities that she could develop. It wasn't just that the organization was willing to help her from a flexibility perspective. That was true. Again, not really a differentiator, but doubling down and supporting her with some coaching around how she was managing the situation from an emotional perspective for herself, her willingness to ask for help, her perception of failure for herself, the fact that someone else on her team had to take on some of her workload for a few months. There was a lot in there that she was able to experience in a much more, I believe, empowered way because of the additional skills that we helped her develop as a person, not necessarily skills for her role in particular. And that really is the premise of what I'm sharing. Developing the person, all boats rise with the tide. When you develop the person, everything lifts when it comes to the skills they bring to the table. So that's a great example that I feel really good about. And she is reengaged. Thankfully, both of her family members are well. This is a couple years ago now. And she's one of the first examples where I really understood that intrinsic benefit that's there, the investment in the individual and that unique differentiator, how much that helps the person feel cared about, and the amount of allegiance it draws back to the organization to say, you've had my back when I needed you. You've helped me do something I didn't know I could do. And I'm going to reciprocate. I'm going to show up and I'm going to have your back when you need me to have it. That relationship is really deepened in my experience when we can help people develop personally.
Those are typically relationships that we understand on a personal level, whether it was an aunt that poured into us, a friend that poured into us in a time of need, and the allegiance and well, I've got your back. We don't typically equate that with what's going on inside of the workplace. And what I liked about that was it was a clear example how you could see something going on negative in her personal life would absolutely transition over and could negatively impact her in the workplace.
Absolutely.